The Aero West jet gleaming outside could have all its lights shut down with a single command, its entire schedule frozen, thousands of jobs halted in an instant. And the man who held that power was standing silently by the window, wearing a deep navy suit no one bothered to look at twice. Ethan Caldwell folded his arms, watching each aircraft roll steadily along the Chicago O'Hare runway. From a distance, the loudspeaker announcements rose and fell like the heartbeat of a massive system. 7 days earlier, this airport had been nothing more than another stop on another business trip. Now it was the starting line of a confrontation that would change an entire industry. On the surface, Ethan looked like any middle-aged professional preparing for a flight. Tall fit, a suit without any flashy logos, a graphite carry-on, no assistant, no bodyguard, no spectacle. He slipped his phone into the inside pocket of his jacket and exhaled slowly. At the far end of the gate area, groups of white men in grey and navy suits chatted with an ease born from boardrooms and confidence they never had to earn. To anyone who didn't know him, Ethan could have been one of them, just another routine traveler. No one would guess he was the man who had built a garage startup into a publicly traded digital security empire worth tens of billions. Ethan leaned forward slightly, letting his forehead rest against the cold glass. His reflection blended into the Aero West aircraft outside, white fuselage, red tail, a faded logo, worn down by years of overuse. A technician wheeled a ladder across the tarmac, signaling to a colleague. Everything moved like a well-practiced machine, as if nothing was wrong with the way this airline treated its passengers, as if the incident 7 days ago had never happened. 7 days. Too short for some people to even clear their inbox, yet long enough for someone like Ethan to peel back the polished mask of first-class service and stare straight into the rot beneath it. He closed his eyes. The rain-streaked runway faded, replaced by the memory of that morning at another airport when his mood had been completely different. That day had started almost suspiciously perfect. His black Tesla glided smoothly into the drop-off lane at the domestic terminal. Clear skies, mild sun. No traffic. His driver, a middle-aged man named Howard, hurried to the back, lifted the trunk, and retrieved the carry-on Ethan had packed himself the night before. A simple trip, one spare, suit a laptop and documents for the upcoming meeting with European investors flying into New York. You take off in 90 minutes, Mr. Caldwell Howard said, handing him the bag with a familiar smile. Online check-in is done. Seat 1C first class. I'll be here Thursday afternoon when you return. Ethan nodded. Thanks, Howard. I'll text you if anything changes. No red carpet, no welcoming committee. Just a black man walking through a revolving door, pulling a suitcase behind him. Thousands of people did the same thing every day. And even though he could charter a private jet whenever he wanted, Ethan still chose to fly commercial. He liked blending into the crowd. He liked observing the world from an 18-inch seat where conversations, glances, and unconscious attitudes revealed themselves with clarity. He had learned more from airports than from any corporate culture report ever written. That morning he passed through security with the muscle memory of a seasoned traveler, removing his watch, placing his laptop in a bin, walking barefoot through the scanner, nodding to the TSA agent who recognized his name. Montgomery Digital, sorry, Caldwell Technologies, the young agent said, a bit shy but enthusiastic. I use your company's software. Ethan smiled warmly. I appreciate that. He never needed recognition, but he appreciated every person who understood the work behind his success. After clearing security, he checked the flight board. Aero West AW2 Sanfortien to New York was on-time boarding in 40 minutes. Beside the listing glowed a row of gold symbols for first-class priority elite members. His name had been in that category for 7 years. Over 2 million miles flown. Thousands of hours in the leather seats, sold as privileges. He walked toward the lounge, but stopped when he heard the boarding call for another flight. He noticed something he always paid attention to: who was invited to board first, who was asked to wait off to the side, who received a full smile, who received only a glance. Ethan had never seen himself as a victim. His mother Eleanor had taught him early, "You will walk into rooms where they are ready to doubt your every breath. Do not let them decide who you are." He had grown up between two worlds, a working-class black neighborhood where a missed bill meant losing dinner, and a college campus where most students didn't worry about tuition. He understood that airports, the gateways of society, revealed those divides most clearly. He turned away from the lounge and headed straight for the gate. The Aero West waiting area was already crowded. Hard-shell suitcases lined up beside tailored pants, steaming coffee cups, glowing laptop screens. At the front, the first-class priority sign sat on a metal stand, drawing an invisible border everyone understood, but no one openly named. Ethan stood behind it, scanning the crowd. An older white man describing a golf trip, a blonde woman adjusting her Hermes scarf, a young guy absorbed in a stock trading app. They all looked like the picture society painted of a first-class flyer. Suits watches, laptops, easy confidence. Ethan's fingers brushed the leather strap of his Patek, the watch his mother gave him after his first IPO. It wasn't meant as a status symbol. It was a reminder you've gone further than she ever dreamed possible. When the speaker announced first-class boarding, Ethan stepped forward and opened the Aero West app, ready to show his digital boarding pass. It was a routine gesture, almost automatic. A second earlier, he had been thinking about investor slides, the Berlin office expansion, a new algorithm his team was refining. 1 second later, everything shifted. The gate agent, a white woman in her late 50s, named Linda Hawthorne, glanced up and gave him a thin smile. Not hostile, not welcoming, just that familiar expression he had seen his whole life in rooms where people decided who he was before he said a word. "Boarding pass and ID," Sir Linda said. Ethan handed her his phone, clearly showing AW214 first class. Seat 1C, along with his ID from his leather wallet. Smooth. Respectful. Routine. He had no reason to brace for conflict. Linda looked from the screen to his face, then back to the screen. The thin smile vanished. Her brows tightened. A slow blink just long enough to reveal her confusion, as if the system was showing something that didn't match the man standing in front of her. A black man, and seat 1C in first class. "You need a printed boarding pass," she said flatly. Ethan blinked. "The Aero West app has always accepted digital boarding passes," he replied politely. "I've used it for years." Behind him, a white man wearing a blue tie extended his phone. Linda's face brightened instantly as she scanned it and said, "Have a wonderful flight, Mr. Anderson." Ethan watched the interaction like a slow-motion replay. Same action, same digital pass. Only the face was different. And suddenly, every memory layered itself inside him. Every time he had been scrutinized, mistaken for staff, instead of a keynote speaker. Every look he had received in luxury hotels. It wasn't the first time, but this time would be the last. He didn't know it yet. All he felt was something he had pushed aside for years, slowly waking up. Not anger, but the resolve of a man who knew he had the power to stop an entire system in its tracks. Outside the window, the Aero West jet waited calmly like an old creature used to routine. It didn't know that within a few decisions, its owner would change, and the first-class cabin where one seat had just been denied would become the beginning of a painful but necessary rebirth. "Pron." Linda cleared her throat and set the boarding pass scanner down on the counter as if she had just touched something that could not be trusted. "So please step aside for a moment so I can handle this all right." Her tone was still polite, but it had hardened like an automatic glass door that only opened halfway. Ethan tilted his head slightly. He had heard this line enough times in his life to know exactly what it meant. "Is there a problem with my reservation?" he asked, not moving an inch. Linda avoided his eyes. "The system is showing an error. I need more time to check. Please step aside. I have to continue processing other passengers." Other passengers, Ethan heard the way she pressed on the word other. Behind him, the line began to shift restlessly. A white man in a grey suit that reeked of sharp cologne pushed his suitcase forward and sighed. "Let me try again," Ethan suggested, bringing his phone closer to the scanner. The QR code was still perfectly clear, his name, seat number, and class of service impossible to mistake. Linda put her hand on the scanner to block him. "I already told you there is an error," she repeated, her voice raised now. "You are obstructing the boarding flow, sir." Ethan felt a very thin line inside him, between calm and hurt, being drawn. He did not shout. He did not slam his hand on the counter. Years of navigating a corporate world that was mostly white had taught him one essential skill: the ability to control every small muscle in his face. "I understand," he said slowly. "But before I step aside, can you tell me exactly what the error is? I see the person behind me still having their electronic boarding pass scanned without any issue." As if on cue, the man in the grey suit reached around his phone, almost brushing Ethan's shoulder. Linda instantly lit up with a bright smile, pulled the scanner toward him and said, "Welcome, Mr. Patterson. We wish you a wonderful flight as always." A soft beep and his boarding pass was accepted immediately. You see, Ethan said, his voice still even. Same app. Same type of code. Linda's eyes sharpened. She leaned toward the small microphone clipped to her collar. "If you continue to cause disturbance," she said deliberately, loud enough for people nearby to hear, "I will have to call security." From the seating area, a few heads lifted. A woman whispered to her husband. "Here we go again." A young man stopped typing on his laptop and watched the scene like he was staring at a social media clip he already knew would end up being shared everywhere. Ethan inhaled deeply. 2 decades of boardrooms, global conferences, and board meetings where he was often the only black man in the room had built a reflex in him. When insulted, he slowed down. He felt each heartbeat, each breath, as if moving too fast would accidentally confirm every stereotype they were waiting to see in him. "I am not causing a disturbance," he said, eyes fixed on Linda. "I am simply asking to be treated like other passengers. If there is a system error, I want to understand what kind of error it is." Linda could feel the energy in the air shift. She was used to people stepping back, staying quiet, swallowing unfairness in silence just to avoid trouble. But this man didn't step back. He stood straight, spoke calmly, and that irritated her more than any shouting would have. She picked up the desk phone and pressed a button. "Security to gate C14, she said, crisply, disruptive passenger refusing to follow instructions. In the distance, Ethan saw two figures in blue security uniforms approaching. One was tall with a buzz cut, his hand hovering near the taser on his belt. The other was younger, his eyes constantly scanning the area. A small bubble of space opened up around Ethan, as if someone had drawn an invisible danger circle around the black man in a suit. "Is there a problem here?" the taller security officer asked in a steady voice. "This individual is blocking boarding and refusing to comply with instructions," Linda said, quickly, seizing the chance to frame the story before Ethan could speak. "He has not provided a valid boarding pass." Ethan turned to the two officers. "I have provided an electronic boarding pass that this airline accepts," he said. "I have also shown my ID. I am only asking why my boarding pass is being rejected when other people using the same method are being allowed through." The younger officer glanced at Linda's screen. "Is there an issue with his reservation?" he asked. Linda pretended to type a few keys, then furrowed her brow even deeper. In truth, she had seen the reservation details from the beginning: first class, platinum, elite, no errors. But something an unspoken prejudice she would never name had told her she needed to double-check this one. "The system is asking for additional identity verification," she replied evasively. "And there has been a change in seat allocation." Ethan heard those last three words like a punch to the chest. What change? She hesitated for a beat, then chose her escape route. "Your first-class seat has been reassigned for aircraft weight balance. We can seat you in economy row 34. "Row 34, Ethan repeated, as if giving his mind time to catch up with the conversation. He had been downgraded before, when an aircraft type changed, or when flights were delayed, and each time he had been notified in advance and properly compensated. This time it was happening right in front of him, with no real explanation, only evasive eyes. He looked out through the gate window. In the first-class cabin, he could see 3 empty seats, already set with pillows and blankets. Weight balance? He almost laughed. A middle-aged woman behind him whispered, not nearly quietly enough for him not to hear. Maybe he bought a regular ticket and is trying to sneak into first class. A soft yeah of agreement came from someone else. The tall security officer sighed and gave Ethan a quick once-over, taking in the well-cut suit, the high-quality suitcase, the expensive watch. For a split second it looked like he wanted to say something, then he stopped himself. His job was not to fix the airline's mistakes. His job was to keep everything in order. "Sir," he said quietly, just loud enough for Ethan to hear, "if you do not accept the new seat, you will miss your flight. And they do have the right to deny you boarding." Ethan understood. The deal with the investors in New York was not going to wait for anyone. If he missed this flight, the meeting would have to be rescheduled. Their confidence could waver, and hundreds of his employees would feel the impact. He looked at Linda one last time. She was still standing there, lips pressed, tight eyes, daring him to choose, swallow it, or be pushed out of the system. In the silence that stretched for a few seconds, 2 battles were happening at once. On the surface, pick the seat or miss the flight. Inside, would he keep putting up with it like so many times before, or would he do something different? Ethan rolled his shoulders back like a fighter in the ring, choosing to take a punch in order to change the entire fight. "All right," he said, his voice dropping lower. "I will board with the economy seat. But I want your full name and your employee ID." Linda's face flickered. She was used to vague complaints, emails sent to some customer care inbox and buried under layers of automated responses. But this man said it with a certainty that unsettled her. "You can contact Aero West customer service," she replied, trying to regain control. Ethan did not answer. He took the newly printed boarding pass where seat 1C first had disappeared and been replaced by seat 34B economy. One small change in text, but behind it was an entire value system that had just pushed him down to a seat beside the lavatory. As he walked down the jet bridge, the loudspeaker behind him kept calling, "First class, boarding, elite boarding." People moved aside for him, not out of respect, but to avoid being caught up in whatever this was. The smell of jet fuel, mixed with early morning coffee, flooded in a scent that reminded him of hundreds of flights he had taken. But this time, every step he took on the carpet seemed to press a decision deeper into place, a decision he had not yet fully named. Passing through the first-class cabin, Ethan glanced over and saw a flight attendant pouring champagne for a white passenger, her smile soft and sparkling, like the bubbles in the glass. As he walked by, her eyes slid over him, as if he were an empty space, someone who did not belong there. He kept going. Row 10, row 18, row 25. With each step, the aisle felt narrower, the ceiling lower. Finally, he stopped at row 34, the middle seat near the lavatory, where the door kept opening and closing, with a dry, mechanical click. The man on his right, heavyset, wearing a T-shirt with a sports team logo, shifted his body, making room without hiding his annoyance. "Tight in here," he grumbled, then looked at Ethan with a doubtful glance that seemed to ask, "Are you sure you are in the right place?" Ethan fastened his seatbelt. "Yes, this is the right seat," he said quietly, almost as if speaking to himself. "For now." The plane began to taxi. Somewhere in the mind of a man who had been pushed from seat 1C down to seat 34B, a thought slowly took shape. If they truly believed this was the only place he deserved to sit, maybe it was time to prove them completely wrong. When the soft ding signaled that the plane had reached cruising altitude, Ethan felt a dull ache spreading across his shoulders from the cramped seat. The man on his right had taken up almost a third of Ethan's space, while the young woman on his left kept opening a bottle of thick lavender lotion that filled the air with an overpowering floral scent. The lavatory door beside him swung open every few minutes, sending out waves of humid air mixed with disinfectant like an unpleasant burst of cold wind. But none of that discomfort compared to the silence tightening in his chest. A silence, heavy as metal, sharp as a blade, glowing like buried embers. He opened his laptop but could not type a single line. The slides for the investor meeting blurred. Each word reminded him of one truth: he had been pushed out of a seat he had every legal right to occupy, simply because someone decided he did not belong there. Ethan exhaled, closed the laptop, and at that moment the monotone voice of a flight attendant came from above him. "Water, sir." It was not a question, more of an obligation, recited out of habit. Ethan looked up. Megan, the economy cabin flight attendant, placed the cup on his tray table without ever looking at his face. No nod. No courtesy smile. She turned away instantly, as if she wanted to avoid standing near him for even a second longer. Not long after, a white man in row 33 spilled his coffee on his blazer. Megan rushed back immediately, apologizing profusely, bringing paper towels, club soda, and the words, "I'm so sorry, that was my fault." As she walked back toward the rear, her eyes brushed over Ethan and paused on his wristwatch, the Patek worth more than her car. Something shifted. "Sir, do you need anything else?" she asked, her voice suddenly soft, warm in a way that felt almost artificial. Ethan held her gaze for 2 seconds, then answered gently, "No, thank you. That thank you was sharp as a knife, not out of anger, but because he finally understood something he had spent years choosing not to look at people treated him differently, not because of who he truly was, but because of the story they decided to attach to him. Megan moved on, though the confusion on her face lingered. Ethan folded his hands on his knees, staring at the screen on the seat back ahead. Behind that calm expression, his mind was running calculations no one in this cabin could imagine. Aero West's market cap, the hidden debts tucked inside their financial statements, the legal vulnerabilities in their internal policies, the way the right CEO at the right moment could drain their leverage within weeks. He did not know when he had stepped onto that path, but perhaps it began the moment he was handed that new boarding pass with the number 34B, an insult packaged in a tiny slip of paper, the first gear quietly turning. The plane hit a small patch of turbulence. The man beside him grumbled something about seats made for children. Ethan almost laughed. The small seat was the least significant problem today. In the dark reflection of the blank screen, after he powered it off, Ethan saw himself composed, but his eyes were not the eyes he had a few hours earlier. This was no longer the look of a man who tolerated unfairness just to keep things easy, but the look of someone who had gone far enough in life to know that some battles, if avoided, once would come back to crush you again and again. As the plane began its descent, Ethan felt his mood sink with it. Today he looked more disheveled than usual, his shirt wrinkled from the cramped cabin, his tie crooked to the cuff of his sleeve, still marked with dried coffee. Nothing about him resembled the polished CEO expected to walk into a meeting with European investors, but he had to go straight into that meeting the moment he left the plane. No time to fix his appearance. No time to rebuild confidence through perfection. When the wheels touched the runway and passengers scrambled to stand, Ethan stayed seated. The cabin lights came on, illuminating the quiet exhaustion wrapped around him. He remembered his mother's words. You do not have to prove your worth by where you sit. But if someone tries to push you down, you have the right to stand up and take the entire chair with you. The heavy-set man stepped past him, impatience in his eyes. Are you getting up or not? I need to get out. Ethan rose, moved aside, and said nothing. And in that brief moment, in the stranger's dismissive glance, he saw what he had felt all day, but had not put into words. They had grown accustomed to believing he belonged here, in this cramped, noisy, restroom-scented corner of the plane. The flight was delayed 20 more minutes at the gate. Then another 10, because the aisle was clogged with slow-moving passengers. Each minute cut deeper into the precious time he had left before the meeting. Finally, he stepped out of the cabin, dragging a suitcase whose wheels were jammed from the crowded overhead bins. The jet bridge stretched long in front of him, neon lights casting a cold white glow across his face. His driver was already waiting, but Ethan did not head for the car. He stood still before the glass wall, looking down at the damp New York tarmac. The Aero West fleet lined up in a neat row, as if flaunting the arrogance of an empire that had forgotten one truth. The person they treated as the weakest might be the one capable of breaking their entire system apart. 30 minutes left to prepare for the meeting. He closed his eyes. A thought slipped into his mind, sharp and undeniable. If they think I will let this go like all the other times, they do not know me at all. And right there, not in the meeting, not while reviewing notes on the plane, but in that exact moment, Ethan Caldwell made a decision. He would dig to the root of the problem. Not for revenge, but to rebuild. A rotten system needed to be torn out from its foundation. And he was the one with enough power to rip the entire route free. 3. As the car pulled away from the airport, Ethan leaned his head lightly against the leather seat, but his mind was strung tight like a wire. The hum of the engine, the rain slicked Manhattan streets, and the neon lights reflecting across the windows blurred into a dim backdrop behind a single growing thought. Aero West did not just have one bad employee, they had a rotten system, and he needed to see the whole picture. When he arrived, Ethan barely had time to straighten his tie before stepping into the glass building where the meeting was already underway. No one knew he had just endured the worst flight he had taken in years. No one knew he had been pushed out of the first-class seat he had paid for, but the fatigue, the inconvenience, and the dried coffee stain on his sleeve had carved into the composed presence he always brought to critical negotiations. Inside the conference room, the European investors were waiting. He launched the presentation, delivered every point clearly logically, but he could not deny it. He was missing the 60 minutes of preparation time that should have been his. Tough questions he usually handled with precision came out fragmented today, lacking their usual sharpness. The deal was still signed, but the terms were tightened. Profit shares dropped. Timelines were shortened. Several advantages shifted toward the investors. When the documents were finalized, Ethan shook each hand politely, but inside him was a heavy, unsettling quiet. He was not angry that the deal was imperfect. He was angry at the cause of that imperfection. One boarding gate, one discriminatory employee, one aircraft cabin divided by prejudice. That evening in his hotel room, he opened his laptop and stared at the Aero West logo in the flight confirmation email. The longer he stared, the clearer it became. This was not just about today. This was how Aero West had treated passengers like him for a very long time. He called Alicia Bennett his company's COO, his closest friend since college, the one who often understood his thoughts before he spoke them aloud. Alicia appeared on screen, with her curls tied high and her signature sharp gaze. "You landed already. How was the meeting?" Ethan hesitated for a beat. "Fine. Sort of." Alicia raised an eyebrow. "That's not your kind of sort of." What happened? And Ethan told her, from the boarding gate, to the seat reassignment, to the flight attendant's behavior, to the delay that cost him the preparation he needed. Alicia did not interrupt once, but her expression changed from calm to cold, then into the familiar fire of a black woman who had spent her entire life navigating the weight of bias. Ethan ended with a breath, almost a whisper. "I don't want to make a scene. I just want to understand why this keeps happening." Alicia leaned closer to the camera. "Because they don't think you belong there. Because they think first class is their playground, not ours. And because Aero West has allowed this to happen for years." Ethan rubbed his face, the warm, golden hotel light casting shadows over the exhaustion he usually hid so well. "I want to know if this was an isolated incident, or if it's part of their culture." Alicia did not hesitate. "Let me call Derek and Andre. We'll have your answer in 72 hours. And she delivered. 3 days later, at the Caldwell Technologies headquarters in Atlanta, Ethan stood before a 2-meter LED screen, the blue glow of the company logo reflected against the glass wall behind him, while the team he trusted most waited at his side. Alicia clicked to the first slide. "You wanted the truth? Here it is." The first line froze the entire room. 473 discrimination complaints from black passengers about Aero West in the past 18 months. Derek added in his CFO tone, "That rate is 8 times higher than the complaints from white passengers, even though the travel volume is similar." Andre, the head of legal, placed a stack of documents on the table. 26 black executives from different corporations submitted sworn statements. Every one of them describes almost the same pattern-forced, re-verification seat changes, disrespectful service. Alicia tapped to the next slide. A scan of an internal Aero West document appeared. A faint note read, "Passenger doesn't match typical first-class profile request, additional verification." Ethan shifted. "Typical first-class profile," Alicia pressed her lips together. They did not write the words, "white passenger," but everyone knows what it means. The next line made Ethan's hand tighten. A former Aero West HR manager confirmed this was a silent policy, disguised under the label of flight security. But it was not over. Derek opened the financial report. Aero West is hiding a crisis. 6 consecutive losing quarters. Problems borrowing money. And this is the blow: they no longer have enough cash to pay a major bond maturing in 4 months. Alicia stepped back, eyes fixed on Ethan. "You know what that means." Ethan didn't answer. He looked at the screen as though looking straight through it. Gerald Whitmore. Andre added 61-year-old CEO repeatedly accused of racist remarks. Several recordings from internal retreats. Trust me, you don't want to hear the things he said. Ethan didn't need to hear them. He already understood. What happened at the boarding gate was only the tip of a massive iceberg. In that quiet conference room, so silent that the hum of the air conditioning seemed loud, a decision formed in his mind, sharp and solid as metal. If a system is discriminatory from its roots, the only way to fix it is to replace the roots entirely. Alicia looked at him, lowering her voice. "Ethan, are you thinking what I'm thinking?" He turned toward the glass wall, where Atlanta stretched out beneath the sunset. Skyscrapers reaching into the clouds, streets glowing like the veins of a city he had helped transform. He did not need to answer the question, because the answer was already written clearly in his eyes. Aero West did not need a complaint email. They needed a purge. And Ethan Caldwell, with his intelligence, his resources, and his influence, was exactly the man who could make it happen. Not for revenge, but to end a system that had harmed thousands of people like him. Because sometimes, to fix a house that has rotted to its core, the only solution is simple. Tear it down and build it again. The moment Alicia finished speaking, the room seemed to sink by a beat. No one said another word, but Ethan could feel the shift in the air, as if the 3 of them were standing at the thin dividing line between a bold decision and an actual storm. Aero West was not a small company. It was a national airline, a legacy brand spanning 3 generations, a giant nearly everyone had heard of. And the thought Alicia had just voiced, "You're thinking what I am thinking," was not something any ordinary person would ever consider. But Ethan was not ordinary. He was the man who had built Caldwell Technologies from a cramped dorm room into a multi-billion-dollar cybersecurity empire. He had defeated competitors, stronger, richer, and older. He was the kind of man who only needed to ask the right question to make a system reveal its own weakest link. Ethan spun the pen between his fingers. A small gesture, but the clearest sign that he was analyzing every variable. Derek eyed him, concern flickering in his expression. "Ethan, do you mean you really want to buy out Aero West?" A beat of silence. Then Ethan lifted his head. It's not about wanting to, it's about being able to. His voice was low, calm, and solid like tempered steel. Alicia folded her arms, her gaze slicing through every layer of implication. You know, this is nothing like acquiring a startup, right? This is a national airline with thousands of employees, billions in debt, and a CEO who will do anything to keep his seat. Ethan leaned back slightly, his eyes glinting with something new. Do you think Gerald can do anything worse than allowing his staff to discriminate against first-class passengers, or hiding financial holes, or writing discriminatory memos under the label of security? If I do nothing, who will be the next person treated the way I was? Andre stepped in. If you actually go through with this, you'll be stepping into a pit of fire. Politics, media, shareholders, the entire aviation industry will see you as a disruptor, or worse, a destroyer. Ethan replied without hesitation. Sometimes to change an industry, you have to break what has already rotted. In that tone, Andre and Derek recognized it immediately. The decision had already been made. There was no more debate to be had. Alicia exhaled, not out of fear, but because she knew Ethan better than anyone else. When he asked, "Why not?" he was already preparing to turn the impossible into the inevitable. "So where do you start?" she asked. Ethan stood, walked to the whiteboard, uncapped a marker, and wrote 3 bold words: Phase 1. Covert acquisition. He explained, his voice precise. We cannot publicly announce any intent to take over Aero West. If we do, their stock price will spike. Gerald will build walls, and every bank tied to him will shut their doors on us. Derek nodded. He's right. If we're going to buy them, it has to be quiet, through multiple shell companies. Stay under the 5% threshold to avoid SEC disclosures. Alicia added, and timing is everything. They're in financial crisis. If we appear at the right moment, several major funds will want to jump ship before it sinks. Ethan smiled faintly. Exactly. He wrote January to March, accumulate shares under the radar. I'll put in $1 billion of my own money, he said firmly. This won't touch the company. If Aero West wants a fight, they'll be fighting me, not Caldwell Technologies. Derek blinked. $1 billion of your own, this is personal, Ethan said. And a broken system deserves a personal strike. Near Phase 2, he wrote, expose the truth. Alicia nodded. We build the file, the data, the testimonies in case Gerald fires back. And we make sure that when the truth comes out, everyone sees this as a systemic issue, not an emotional outburst. Andre added, we'll do it through legal channels, discrimination charges, ethical violations, financial concealment. If necessary, we'll take it to the press. Ethan added quietly, but only when we hold enough shares, not a second earlier. Phase 3. He wrote, strip Gerald of power. Once we control 30%, Ethan said we'll be entitled to board seats. From there, we pivot. Alicia raised an eyebrow. And the final phase, Ethan lowered the pen and wrote the last line. Phase 4. Rebuild. Recreate Aero West into a fair, modern airline. Everyone in the room stared at that line, not in shock, but because they understood. This was not about revenge. This was a surgical operation to heal a system that had been sick for decades. At that moment, the glass wall beside them reflected the blazing red Atlanta sunset. The sky looked like a storm gathering, beautiful, fierce, unstoppable. Ethan stared at that red sky as if seeing 2 roads ahead. One peaceful and easy file, a complaint accept a $50 voucher, move on. The other chaotic and storm-ridden, acquire an entire airline challenge. An entire industry fight systemic discrimination head-on. He chose the storm. not because he liked to fight, but because he knew if no one fights for fairness, injustice becomes the default. Ethan twirled the pen one last time, then spoke the sentence that shifted the entire room into battle mode. "All right. Let's begin." Alicia smiled a half-smile of someone stepping into a war she believed they could win. Derek opened his laptop, pulling up the financial models. Andre reached for his phone to summon the legal team. In that glass-walled room on the 23rd floor, the man who had once been shoved into seat 34B was preparing to become the man who would drag the CEO of a national airline out of the most powerful seat he owned. And Aero West Airlines had just become the target of a man they should never have provoked. 5. Ethan would never forget the feeling of that moment, the way the entire room fell silent for a breath, before suddenly moving again, like a machine jolting to life. Alicia was already on the phone with the data analytics division. Derek pulled up the market tracking dashboard. Andre contacted the legal team in New York to prepare the first batch of documents. But just as everything was running smoothly, Alicia froze, mid-sentence, turned toward Ethan and asked, "Are you sure you want to keep all of this in the dark? Once Aero West senses anything, they're going to strike back, and it won't be clean." Ethan looked at her half-smile, half-seriousness. "I'm not afraid of dirt. I'm afraid of silence." The silent takeover began. 3 days later, the first transactions went through. Small, quiet, without drawing attention. 12,000 shares, 45,000 shares, then 87,000 shares purchased through 3 shell companies: Lydell Capital, Bluestone Holdings, Marwin Asset Group. No one knew these 3 names all belonged to Ethan. One afternoon, Derek slid his laptop across the table toward him, excitement mixing with triumph. "We hit 4.7%, still under the SEC reporting threshold." Alicia immediately interjected, "Stretch it further. Keep buying at this pace. No signature patterns, no footprints." Ethan nodded, though his eyes remained distant. Inside his mind, every detail was aligning into place: cash flow timing, debt maturity dates, market sentiment, the psychology of major shareholders. This was not merely business. This was a chess match between him and Gerald Whitmore, the CEO of Aero West, who still had no idea he was on the brink of losing his power to a passenger he once dismissed. And then, the inevitable meeting had to happen. A week later, Ethan's legal team informed him they had secured a meeting with Gerald under the pretext of a cybersecurity partnership proposal. On the morning of the meeting, Ethan stood in front of the mirror and tightened his tie slowly. Not to impress, but to remind himself today he was walking into the wolf's den. But he was not the prey. Gerald Whitmore. 61 welcomed him into an office so large it bordered on unnecessary. The scent of walnut wood and expensive cologne hung in the air. Gerald did not stand. He simply glanced at Ethan from head to toe with the look of someone who had spent his entire life measuring worth through skin color and brand names. "I heard you want to help Aero West with security." Gerald crossed his arms, his tone bored as if speaking to a salesman. Ethan sat down, calm and steady. "Not just security. I want to talk about how your airline treats its passengers." Gerald's voice dipped for half a second, then sharpened again. "I think you're being overly sensitive, mister. What was it? Carter Caldwell. Cases like yours are not our problem." The air in the room dropped several degrees. Andre, seated beside Ethan, clenched his jaw in anger. Alicia looked at Gerald like she was staring at an extinct species. Ethan, on the other hand, simply tilted his head and gave a faint smile. "Good. Thank you for your honesty." Gerald frowned. "What is that supposed to mean?" Ethan placed a thick folder on the table. "These are 473 discrimination complaints from the past 18 months, 26 sworn statements from senior black executives, edited financial reports, and internal emails instructing staff to identify passengers who do not fit the first-class profile." Gerald scoffed. "What are you going to do?" Sue me, Ethan stood. "No, I'm going to buy your company." Gerald froze. A loud laugh burst out of him, almost shrill. "You buy Aero West. Who do you think you are?" Ethan leaned forward slightly, looking him directly in the eyes. "I am the man your system underestimated one single time." Then he turned and walked out. No handshake, no courtesy farewell. Behind him, Gerald jumped to his feet and shouted, "You'll regret this." Ethan did not stop. He answered without turning back. "No, Mr. Whitmore. The one who will regret this is you." The quiet war exploded. The next day, Aero West increased its surveillance of any unusual market activity. Gerald had finally sensed something, but it was far too late. Derek stormed into Ethan's office with a fresh report. "We just hit 11%. 2 pension funds are ready to sell more. At this rate, in a few weeks, you'll control the board." Alicia crossed her arms, her smile sharp as a blade. "Gerald is out of time to block us." But Ethan shook his head. "He will try everything, even tactics no one expects." And he was right. That night, the first counter-strike arrived. While Ethan was analyzing the shareholder list, his phone began vibrating non-stop, 29 messages, from legal 8 red-flagged emails from PR, 12 missed calls from his CIO. Alicia burst into his office, pale. "Ethan, we have a situation. Everywhere on the financial news feeds, the same headline flashed Caldwell Technologies accused of illegal customer data sales." Ethan stopped cold. Then he closed his eyes for one measured second. Gerald made the first move. Andre rushed in with his laptop already opened. "The evidence is fake. The internal emails were edited. The metadata is wrong. Someone inside Aero West orchestrated this." Alicia tightened her grip on her bag. "This is only the beginning." Ethan set the laptop down and spoke slowly, each word deliberate. "Fine. If he wants to fight from the shadows, then I will drag the entire war into the light." 6. The fake news spread like wildfire in the heat of summer. In a single night, the reputation of Caldwell Technologies. The empire Ethan had spent 18 years building was dragged through the mud by baseless accusations. Rival outlets rushed to speculate. Financial forums buzzed. Social media roared with angry hashtags. By the next morning, the company's stock had plummeted 23% in the first 90 minutes of trading. This was no ordinary market reaction. This was a deliberate attack. Ethan knew it the moment he saw the chart bleeding red. It was exactly the kind of move a desperate, powerful CEO like Gerald Whitmore would make when he sensed his throne slipping. Alicia slammed her hand on the table, voice shaking with fury. "This is him. No one else has the motive, the power, or the filthiness to pull something like this." Derek stood near the screen, his voice tight as wire. "All 4 investment funds we approached last week froze communication. 2 major clients put partnerships on hold. If this continues, it'll take us a year to recover." Ethan listened to everything without reacting. He stared at the screen with eyes so cold, Derek instinctively swallowed. Alicia walked over, placed a hand on his shoulder, and whispered, "Ethan, we can stop. No one expects you to keep fighting. This attack is hitting the company, not just you." Ethan rose slowly. "No, This is not the moment to stop. His voice was low, steady, unshaken. Gerald thinks I'll fall to my knees to protect this company's reputation. What he doesn't understand is, he turned to the room. I didn't build Caldwell Technologies to play safe. I built it to win. The first counter-strategy. Ethan summoned the entire crisis response team. 20 minutes later, the main conference screen filled with legal teams, PR managers, data forensics experts, and senior communications advisors. Andre gave the first report. We analyzed the metadata in the leaked emails. All of them show signs of tampering, and the editing was done using AeroWest's internal software. We have proof these documents are fabricated. Alicia added quickly, "You can file a report with the SEC and the FTO, but we need to be careful. If we move too soon, Gerald will flip the narrative." Derek pointed at another red flashing number. The stock dropped another 7%. "Ethan, make a call. We cannot wait any longer." Ethan closed his eyes for a few seconds, then opened them with a sharpness that made the entire room fall silent. "We strike back." Alicia frowned. "What exactly are you planning?" Ethan answered each word with precision. "We do not defend. We attack. The counteroffensive, the Phoenix Protocol." He opened a file he had prepared the night before. The title glowed on the screen, Phoenix Protocol. 3 branches. 1, expose the forged documents, send the entire metadata package to TechCrunch Wired and the Wall Street Journal anonymously, and let their journalists confirm the truth independently. 2, file a formal report to the SEC, accusing AeroWest of market manipulation through fabricated information. 3, protect the accumulating shares. Derek would immediately restructure the investment entities to prevent AeroWest from tracing the acquisitions. Alicia stared at Ethan, half impressed, half stunned. "You prepared all of this?" Ethan replied quietly, his voice like the strike of a metal bell. "The moment Linda pushed me down to seat 34B, I knew this was coming." The counterattack began. At exactly 4 in the afternoon, the first article appeared. Independent security expert confirms Caldwell Tech emails show signs of fabrication. 20 minutes later came the second Is AeroWest involved in spreading false information? 2 hours later, TechCrunch erupted. Breaking internal source confirms AeroWest instructed staff to handle passengers who did not match first-class profile. Social media flipped in less than 1 evening. The hashtag AeroWestRacist shot to the top of the trending list. Old videos of black passengers describing discriminatory treatment resurfaced like a tidal wave. Alicia looked at the suddenly reversing chart and let out a short, delighted breath. Gerald is probably throwing his laptop at the wall right now. Ethan did not smile. Not yet. He has more, and he did. At 10 that night, while Ethan was reviewing the shareholder list, his phone buzzed violently. 29 messages from legal, 8 red-flagged emails from PR, 12 missed calls from his CIO. Alicia burst into his office, pale. "Ethan, something happened." Across every major financial news site, the same headline blinked in bold: Caldwell Technologies, accused of illegally selling customer data. Ethan froze, then inhaled once as if steadying himself. Gerald made his move. Andre rushed in with his laptop. "The evidence is fake. The internal emails were tampered with. The metadata is wrong. Someone inside AeroWest manufactured these." Alicia clenched her bag. "This is only the beginning." Ethan set the laptop aside and spoke slowly. "If he wants to fight from the shadows, then I will drag the whole war into the light." But then, The worst blow landed. Ethan was still in his office when his phone rang again, this time with a name that made his heart stop. Kayla, his daughter. Her voice cracked from the first word. Dad Tyler told everyone at school that you're trying to destroy his family's company. He said you're using the race card to get attention. Ethan gripped the phone tight. Gerald did not just attack him. He had dragged his son into it and used that boy to strike at Ethan's daughter. Kayla continued, her voice breaking. No one will talk to me now. They say I'm the daughter of a troublemaker. I don't know what to do. Ethan closed his eyes, tilting his head back to hold down the fire rising in his chest. He had prepared for financial attacks. He was ready for legal warfare. But he was not prepared for this, for his daughter crying because she had been pulled into the line of fire. Alicia walked in just as Kayla finished speaking, and for the first time in years, she saw Ethan falter, not because of money, not because of reputation, but because someone had struck at the one place he had no armor. The moment he almost quit. As Ethan sank into his chair, hands hanging loosely at his sides, Alicia recognized a dangerous threshold, the place where even the strongest leaders make the worst decisions. Ethan, she said softly, you can stop. No one will blame you. He did not respond. He stared out the window where the city lights blurred like a distorted galaxy. Voices echoed in his mind like a storm. Dad, they're calling me the daughter of a troublemaker. You'll lose everything. Gerald is too powerful. End the campaign. Alicia stepped closer and placed a hand on his shoulder. Don't let him push you to this edge. You have a family, a company. Thousands of employees depending on you. Ethan stayed silent for a long time. In that moment, he truly considered stopping, walking away, letting everything fade back to the old order. Then he opened his eyes, but they were not the eyes of a man ready to quit. They were the eyes of someone who had just realized the most important truth. If I don't fight, Ethan said, voice deep and trembling slightly, then Kayla, my daughter, will grow up in a world where a man like Gerald can do this and face no consequences. He stood, straight-backed, eyes blazing like forged steel. No, I'm not stopping. Alicia let out a thin smile, the smile of a warrior seeing her ally rise again. Then we strike back. Ethan nodded. Not just strike back. We finish this war. 7. Ethan returned to the strategy room close to midnight, the white lights casting sharp lines across a face that held no exhaustion anymore, only the fierce resolve of a blade freshly sharpened. Without hesitation, he called the core team back. Alicia arrived first, followed by Derek Andre and the Data Analytics Division. The conference room lit up as Jasmine, the head analyst, opened the main screen, her hands trembling slightly from the discovery she had just made. We traced the metadata, cross-checked internal IP logs, analyzed the timestamp rendering on the emails, and we have the result. Ethan folded his arms and nodded once. Tell me. Jasmine pressed a key. The screen displayed a digital fingerprint, as clear and undeniable as a confession. Every forged document was created inside Aero West's internal server. The air in the room seemed to collapse inwards. Andre slammed the stack of folders on the table. 100% confirmed. This is fabricated evidence market manipulation and a deliberate corporate attack. Alicia pointed to the final line in the report. And the most disturbing part, the access was activated using the account of Gerald Whitmore. Derek exhaled sharply, caught between outrage and disbelief. That man has lost it. He used his own CEO credentials to launch a smear campaign. Ethan replied without a second of doubt. Not lost it. He's desperate. He turned to the entire team. From this moment on, we're no longer defending. We attack from both sides. His orders came fast. Andre, prepare the filing for the SEC. This is a severe violation of securities law and market integrity. Derek, protect the acquired shares by restructuring every shell corporation. Aero West must not find the trail. Alicia, prepare a full transparency report. Anyone asks anything, we give them the real numbers. Then he looked at Jasmine. I want every Aero West employee who has been deleting passenger complaints identified. Tonight. The team moved, instantly transformed into a newly awakened army. Emails shot out. Data uploaded. Legal documents finalized. Anonymous calls to major media outlets initiated. By 5 in the morning, the first wave of articles detonated across the internet. Legal experts confirm the leaked Caldwell Tech emails are fabricated. Internal source reveals Aero West deleted complaints from black passengers. Digital evidence links Aero West's CEO directly to forged documents. Social media erupted. The narrative flipped faster than Gerald could respond. Aero West investors panicked, demanding emergency meetings. Employees leaked information anonymously. Dozens of black passengers resurfaced old videos describing discrimination eerily similar to Ethan's. And just as everything was rising like a tidal wave, Ethan's phone rang. An unknown number. He answered. A deep, weary, authoritative voice spoke. Mr. Caldwell, this is Richard Donnelly, member of the Aero West Board of Directors. Alicia and Derek exchanged a look, their hearts pounding. Richard continued, I cannot speak publicly, but everything you suspect about Gerald Whitmore is true. He is not only discriminatory, he has hidden financial mismanagement, manipulated regulations, and he crossed the line when he attacked you. Ethan tightened his grip on the table. Why are you calling me? Richard lowered his voice. Because I've been watching this battle, and for the first time in years, I see hope. A heavy breath. You must keep going. Gerald cannot remain at the head of this airline. Several board members are starting to side with you. Derek's eyes widened. Alicia nearly let out a victory shout, but Richard wasn't finished. Be prepared. Gerald will retaliate with everything he has. But if you survive this phase, you will have the votes to remove him. Ethan closed his eyes for 1 second, absorbing every word. When he opened them again, the sharpness in his gaze held not a single trace of doubt. Thank you, Richard. I know what I need to do. The call ended. The room went silent for a beat before Alicia broke into a blazing smile. Ethan, you just did something no one else had the courage to do. Ethan shook his head. No. Aero West did something wrong. I'm just refusing to let them bury it. He stood looking at his entire team, all of them exhausted from a sleepless night, but their eyes glowing like embers fanned back into fire. Now, he said, his voice steady as stone, we prepare for the next phase. Because Ethan knew one truth. The real battle was still ahead. And this time, he would not simply defend or counter-strike. He would pull the entire foundation of Aero West's power into the light and dismantle the system they used to trample people like him for years. 8. The night sky over Atlanta was coated in a heavy shade of iron gray, streaked with flashes of lightning that cut across the horizon like warnings of a storm waiting to erupt both outside and inside Ethan's life. He stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, staring at the glittering city below without feeling an ounce of peace. Everything he had spent years building was being ripped apart, piece by piece, and the man pulling the strings, Gerald Whitmore, was using every shred of power he had left to crush him. But Ethan didn't yet know that tonight was only the beginning of the breaking point in the entire war. The news exploded across television screens. Caldwell Tech launches internal investigation. After allegations of misconduct, Ethan gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. He knew Gerald was ruthless, but he never imagined the man would go as far as sabotaging Caldwell Tech, a company that had nothing to do with Aero West, just to protect his decaying throne. His phone rang non-stop. Board members, partners, shareholders, journalists. Everyone wanted answers Ethan could not yet give. The door burst open. Alicia strode in her face, drained with fury. Bank of America called. They're considering pulling our credit line because of legal exposure. Derek rushed in behind her, practically out of breath. Ethan, 3 major cybersecurity clients have paused their contracts. They want time to reassess the situation. The hits kept coming, one after another, as if Gerald had prepared an arsenal of weapons just to blow Ethan apart. But the moment that truly stabbed through Ethan's heart came from someone he never expected, Zoe. His phone buzzed again. A text from his daughter Princeton withdrew my acceptance. They said my file has integrity concerns. I don't understand what's happening. Ethan froze. This was no longer an attack on business. This was an attack on a 17-year-old girl, the person he loved most in the world. He called immediately. Zoe answered with a trembling voice. Dad Tyler told everyone at school that Princeton rejected me because you pressured them. He said you're playing the race card to get attention. Everyone thinks I cheated. I'm embarrassed. I don't want to go back to school. Ethan listened as his daughter's voice shattered. Each sentence felt like a blade turning deeper. He had to swallow the fire rising in his chest just to breathe. Zoe, listen to me. None of that is true. None of it. I will fix this. But her voice cracked again. I don't know who to believe anymore. The call ended like a door slamming inside his chest. Ethan stood in the middle of the room, guilt pressing down so hard he felt his spine might break. For the first time in his long life of fighting, he felt dangerously close to giving up. Alicia stepped forward and placed a hand on his shoulder. Ethan, you can't stop. Not now. Zoe is paying the price for me, he whispered, voice rough and low. Everything I'm doing to fight injustice. But she's the one getting dragged into it. Alicia held his gaze with more strength than he could muster himself. That's exactly why you have to win. So she never has to live in a world like this. Ethan drew a slow breath, regaining a shard of control until the next blow landed, and this one struck like a hammer. Andre burst into the conference room, his face pale in a way they had never seen. Ethan Amara was threatened. Alicia stiffened. What Andre handed him a phone showing a photo, Amara's garage, vandalized with slurs and warnings painted in aggressive red spray. Ethan went cold from head to toe. Is anyone hurt? No. But Amara's kids are terrified. The room fell into a silence so heavy it felt metallic. Gerald had crossed every ethical boundary. Now he was attacking everyone Ethan cared about. And at that very moment, Ethan's phone rang again. Another unknown number. He almost let it ring out, but something in his gut made him answer. Mr. Caldwell. The voice was deep, tired, and serious. This is Richard Donnelly from the Aero West Board of Directors. I'm calling because I cannot let Gerald continue this. Ethan said nothing. He simply waited. Donnelly continued. Gerald told the board you were a threat to the company, and he pitched a large-scale smear campaign. Some members objected, but he threatened their seats. You need to know this, he will not stop. But some of us on the board are starting to stand with you. Alicia's mouth fell open. Derek gripped the armrest of his chair. Richard breathed heavily into the receiver. I called to tell you that if you keep going, you can take him down. The board is wavering. We need someone capable of leading after Gerald, and that person is you. The call ended with a sentence that left Ethan standing completely still. You are no longer alone in this fight. Ethan lowered the phone slowly. Alicia looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. Is that a signal or a trap? Ethan lifted his head, his eyes burning with a quiet, unshakable fire. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is, I'm still going forward. Then he stepped out of the conference room, his chest filled with pain, fury, and a new rising certainty. If Gerald wanted to turn this into a war of annihilation, Ethan would turn it into a war that reshaped the entire system. And so P9 ends here. At the moment, Ethan stands on the edge between collapse and eruption, seconds before unleashing the most powerful counterstrike of his life. That sleepless night ended with a morning that left no room for hesitation. Ethan had to strike immediately and hit Gerald in the one place where he was weakest, the board of directors. When the clock struck 6, Ethan called the entire core team into the strategy room. No one felt tired. They all understood that today would decide the fate of the entire war. Ethan stood before the large screen, his voice low but unwavering. Gerald is using every dirty trick he has to destroy us. But he forgot one thing. Real power doesn't come from the filthiest blows. It comes from the truth. He laid out the Phoenix Protocol, the complete rebirth plan. The SEC would receive a full complaint accusing Gerald of market manipulation. The Delaware court would receive legal filings challenging Aero West's illegal poison pill. Major media outlets would receive verified digital evidence proving Aero West forged documents, and the board of directors would receive a financial analysis detailing a company on the brink of implosion. When Ethan finished, the room fell silent for a few seconds, not from doubt, but from sheer awe at the scale of the plan. By 9 a.m., the first wave of counterstrikes surged through the market. Tech publications, financial outlets, and aviation news all published at once. Documents accusing Caldwell Tech are forged by internal Aero West sources. Aero West's stock plunged like a falling stone. Major investors demanded an emergency session. While Gerald scrambled to keep control, Ethan released the second strike formal filings to the SEC and the Delaware court. The legal system immediately entered expedited review. Aero West's poison pill was frozen. At 2 in the afternoon, Ethan's phone rang. Richard Donnelly. Are you ready? The board is meeting now. They want to hear from you. Ethan rose, completely calm. Alicia placed a hand on his shoulder and whispered, "This moment is yours." The Aero West boardroom was filled with tense, unsettled faces. Gerald walked in, trying to look composed, but his clenched hands were flushed red with panic. When Ethan entered the room, shifted with surprise and unease. Gerald let out a mocking laugh. Here to put on a show, Caldwell. Ethan didn't look at him. He placed a thick folder on the table. No. I'm here to show everyone the truth you've been burying. He presented everything. The forged documents, the discriminatory directives in internal emails, the distorted financial numbers, the hidden debt deadlines, The internal scandals, every secret Gerald had spent years covering up. No one spoke. No one could refute it. One board member whispered, "My God!" Gerald slammed his fist on the table. "This is lies." Ethan finally looked him in the eyes, not with anger, but with pity. "Lies? Would you like me to play the recording of you offering me $20 million to walk away?" The room erupted. Gerald's face drained of all color. One board member stood and shouted, "We vote, now!" The result came swiftly, almost brutally. 8 votes to remove him. 1 against. 1 abstention. Gerald Whitmore was stripped of power at Aero West that very day. As security escorted him out of the building, the very same force he had once weaponized against Ethan. Gerald turned back, eyes burning with bitter defeat. Ethan spoke only one sentence, soft as air, yet sharp as a blade. "You took my first-class seat. Today I take your whole airline." And as Gerald disappeared behind the doors, Ethan knew this was not the final victory. It was only the beginning of transforming a broken airline into a symbol of fairness and dignity. From the perspective of an expert in organizational culture and systemic power, Ethan Caldwell's journey reveals a truth that never grows old. Unjust systems rarely collapse because of one powerful blow, but because of the steady resolve of a single person who chooses to rise at the right moment. Ethan did not win because of financial power. He won because he saw the true core of the problem, a discriminatory culture that had rotted from within, and he chose to fix it rather than simply strike back. This was never a battle of ego, but a battle of values, of justice, of power, used the right way. What makes this story truly meaningful is not the dramatic reversal in which a man dismissed as a passenger becomes the one who controls an entire airline, but the message behind it. When an organization disregards human dignity, it digs its own grave. And when one individual dares to face the truth, dares to break the silence, dares to demand change, an entire system can be reborn. If Ethan's journey inspired you, like this video to help spread the message of justice and principled leadership, subscribe to continue following stories where those underestimated rise and reshape entire cultures. And before you go, comment exactly 3 words. Hold your dignity. A reminder that respect is never a privilege, but a fundamental human right.